these props are here, and we are going to open an exhibit about Dickinson and the making of Dickinson and the real life history behind it this summer. And so if you're interested in coming to see that, you can walk through. We have some costumes here too. We've got Higginson's hat here, so Gabe should be wearing this, but we've got a bunch of cool stuff here, and I hope you come visit. You can go on, if you want to learn more about it, you can go to our website, jheritagecenter.org, and you click join our mailing list, and we'll send you notices about when the exhibit is coming up this summer. We have a wonderful program tonight with 4 immensely talented, creative people who are involved in making the show, or are going to talk a little bit about the real life history behind the show. In Brenda's case, we've got 2 actors from the show, Gabe Ebert, who played Colonel Higginson.
Hello.
We've got Wavyy Jones, who played the Wall. We've got Marina Parker, who is the genius behind the sets of Dickinson and has been for the last 3 years. Marina is going to talk a little bit about how they put this together. And we have Brenda Wineapple, who's a terrific scholar. She's the author of White Heat, about the relationship between Thomas Wentworth Higginson and Emily Dickinson. And Gabe's got it too. Gabe's got it.
Plug the book. Got to plug the book.
Absolutely. It's a really great book. And I'm going to share my screen for just a minute and show you what this looked like here.
Oh, yeah.
And this is the J Estate, and this was the campground in the back. And this was a remarkable thing to see over a period of 2 months last year. The crew transformed the J Estate into a Civil War battleground, and primarily the storyline that was set here primarily was a Civil War campground. It's a version of Camp Saxton in Beaufort, South Carolina. And it was the headquarters of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. And this was the first authorized regiment of Black troops to fight in the Civil War. And so this was I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. And this was a kind of a nice coincidence of mission for us, this storyline, because the J Heritage Center is primarily an education center. We do programs in history, in environmental stewardship, and in social justice. And one of our major partners is the African American Cemetery in Rye, in which are buried many of these soldiers from the in their case, the 29th Connecticut Volunteers, some from the 54th Massachusetts. And so we actually just a couple of years ago did an exhibit with photos of descendants of some of those buried in the African American Cemetery in Rye. And so this was a perfect kind of storyline for us. And so we've been really excited about doing this program and talking a little bit about how it came together and the real life history. I just want to remind people before we get going, I see somebody's already asked a question. You know how to do this, but you can type your questions at any time in the Q&A bubble below. And I'm going to ask a few questions just to get us started, but I really want this to be a conversation. So you can do that at any time, and then we'll get to your questions. So I think I will stop blathering at this point, and rather than go through introductions of everybody here, I thought I might just ask each of you to sort of introduce yourselves for just a minute, and maybe I'll start with Marina.
Sure. My name is Marina Parker. I am a set decorator. I worked on all 3 seasons of Dickinson, which has been an incredibly fun project to work on. The research aspect has been really fun, and it's a whole world to dig into. I started off apprenticing in architectural restoration. That was my foundation, and went to Vassar College, studied film. And then I got into documentary for several years, and then segued into feature films and television in the art department. I was a prop master first, and then a set decorator. And yeah. So
awesome. Thank you.
I got here.
Thank you, Marina. And she's going to show us some some pictures later in the program too about how she put together, these sets. She's truly a genius, and it's going to be cool to see that how that came together. Gabe.
Hi, everybody. My name's Gabe Ebert. I'm an actor. I had the privilege of portraying Thomas Wentworth Higginson in this season of Dickinson. I've made most of my living on the stage in New York City. I trained in drama at acting school, and then I sort of came out and I've been doing plays ever since. And one of the very first plays I did out of school was written by a young Elena Smith, who is the showrunner and creator of the show Dickinson. And we became good friends during that time. And then a decade later, I had followed her work and she'd followed mine. And I got an audition for this role. And it was such a thrill when I got the call that I was able to do it, and we were able to reconnect and bring this thing to life. So I feel very privileged to be in this position, and very grateful and happy to be here talking to you guys.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gabe. Wavyy.
Everybody, I'm Wavyy Jones. I'm an artist, music artist. I'm an actor now. I've been doing this for 4 years now. My first gig was Unsolved, The Murders of Tupac and the Notorious B.I.G. I got a chance to play Biggie Smalls on there. And I've had a lot of success with it thus far, and I've been able to come on to this wonderful project and play The Wall in Dickinson.
All right. Thank you, Wavyy. Brenda.
Hi. I feel very honored to be here with people who've put together such a wonderful program, including you, Kevin, putting together this program. But I meant the program Dickinson. I'm a writer. I had encountered, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but written mainly about literary subjects. And I always wanted to write a book about Dickinson, but it's a really hard thing to do because she's so reclusive and we know so little about her. But I'd also run into, in the other books I'd done, I'd run into Thomas Wentworth Higginson, and he intrigued me enormously. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to write a book that just focuses on their friendship? Really is, and really is what the book I do or did called White He Does. And one of the things that's so wonderful about this program, among the many things, but because Gabriel's here, focus on the portrayal of Higginson, which is really the only thing I've ever seen that strikes me to get him and that whole situation in South Carolina that he was so much a part of, in addition to his relationship to Dickinson. So it's really a real honor to be here.
Well, it's a high compliment for Gabe, and I might as well compliment the book too. It's so well written. Brenda's a beautiful writer, and I really recommend the book. And it made me want to pick up one of her other books about Nathaniel Hawthorne, which I think is next on my list. So thank you, Brenda, for joining us as well. I thought maybe I would start I know some of the viewers tonight who are joined us, many have seen Dickinson, I can tell because the questions are already coming in from those who haven't, but some haven't. And I wonder, Marina, if you could tell, just for people who haven't seen the show, just a little bit about the show. There's a lot has been written about Dickinson, but what approach does this show take and how does it differ from other approaches?
Sure. It's a half-hour like surrealist comedy about Emily Dickinson. It's also a little existential. It covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of genres covered. It's not at all a straight period piece. There's contemporary music and contemporary dialogue, and it is deeply, deeply steeped, I think, in research about Emily Dickinson and about the period, but also speaks to the way that we live today and our society works today. And I think that there's something really interesting that Elena did. As Brenda said, Emily Dickinson is one of the most famous poets in the English language, and there is very little that we really know about her because she was completely unknown during her lifetime. And so she's famous. When we know anything about her, it's often that she's reclusive, a spinster, wore a white dress, was cloistered away, and was a wraith, like scribbling away on scraps of paper. And I think that probably, as a lot of history does, misses a lot. So Elena Smith said that she read a book by Alfred Haybeger, My Wars Are Laid Away in Books, that really reimagined who she is and was. And especially in this coming of age, which this story really looks at, I think she was a little shit kicker and rebel and funny and really living life. And even though she didn't travel, she had a very contained life, lived at home her whole life. She still had this amazing ability to describe in a very few words what it is to live, what it is to love, what it is to mourn, and in this kind of transcendental way that really grasped life. So what Elena did that was different than other shows, I think, and really interesting, is she looks at Emily Dickinson from her poetry. So every episode takes one poem and is interpreted around that poem. I would even recommend reading the poem and then watching the episode. It's usually the title of the episode. And because her imagery is really wild, then the show goes really into wild places. It's a little bit of a fever dream, but it all comes back to the poetry, the writing, the way we thought about the sets, the way that we thought about the costumes. It was all derived from her poems and her words. So
that's a great description of the show. And there was when this came out, when they were filming here, there was a profile of Elena, who's the creator of the show you mentioned, in the New Yorker. And the title of the piece was Elena Smith's Subversive Dickinson. And there was a line in this article that said this framework that she used for telling this story allowed Emily Dickinson to be, quote, more subversive than she was in real life. And I wonder, Brenda, what you think about, what you thought of the portrayal of Emily Dickinson in general, and how subversive was she in real life, and how did the portrayal compare?
Well, I kind of was shocked. I don't remember that line from that piece. To say that this is more subversive than Dickinson was kind of a leap. Dickinson was pretty damn subversive. I mean, she was incredibly out there, which is why there's so many myths and stories and assumptions about her. And one of the great things about this production, all aspects of it, is that it gets her humor, it gets her wit, it gets her a humanity, really, whether she grieves or whether she thinks grief is a mouse, or, whatever she's doing, when she's trying to write, her family, her devotion, her anger, all of those things are kind of wrapped up in this person. And as Marina was saying, it's not a period piece at all, which really opens the door and to making it contemporary. Her language is contemporary. Most of the productions I've seen, most of the films really that I've seen about Dickinson, all of them actually, portray her, even the most well-intentioned, as not just out there, that's fine, but weird, alone, unhappy. Here, this is a young, happy, interesting person. And I thought that was a terrific portrayal. Somebody who's committed to writing, but who's also writing as part of life. And that's what the film, the TV show completely gets about her, I think. I just have to say one thing is that you have this almost, as Marina's saying, a fever dream. Dickinson meets with Sylvia Plath. I mean, there you have Sylvia Plath talking about being depressed and suicidal. And Dickinson is looking at her and saying, wait just a minute. I want to go back to the 19th century. Who wants to live in the 1950s? And I think it was really quite insightful and charming at the same time.
Right. And the critics really agreed with you on that. I mean, it was the New York Times named this one of the best shows of 2021. It won a Peabody. So there's a lot of acclaim for this show. the storyline, as I mentioned, that was filmed here at the J Estate, was primarily, there was a couple filmed here, but it was primarily the story of Thomas Wentworth Higginson and the unit of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. And I wonder, Gabe, can you tell us a little bit about Higginson, the man? What was he like, and how did you prepare to play him?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I did to prepare to play him was I read Brenda's book, White Heat. And so it's a real treat to be able to share this panel with her. I think, they say that actions speak louder than words. And when I started to learn about Higginson, who sadly I had never heard of before I began researching for this role because he's largely lost to time, but his actions are tremendous. The way that he stood up for what he believed in, and the moral backbone with which he lived his life. But one of the things that was so great about White Heat is you really got to see his words as well. And for someone who spoke so loudly with his actions, he was incredibly deliberate with his words as well. And he was a great lover of poetry. He was a great lover of text. And so to have his actual text in my hands, to be able to read the very letters that he wrote back and forth with Emily Dickinson, felt there was a really intimate knowledge of him there. I also found another book. He was a prolific journaler. And so a lot of his journals from the very time that he was in South Carolina with the Volunteers, I have his thoughts from the same nights that we're trying to film here. The job, I think, was really interesting because not only was I tasked with portraying Higginson at this point in his life, but I think that Elena was trying to examine something in herself, which is being a leader and a white person in spaces where she's not trying to center whiteness and where she's actually trying to uplift and center other sections of humanity, and finding the ways in which she's doing the right thing or in which she's putting her foot in it. And so my job, I thought, was a really beautiful kind of double tightrope to walk of performing Higginson, trying to do the right thing in his time, and do what he knew was right for the country. And also Elena trying to do what's right now as a creator, creating content in this world. And then I had the great privilege of acting with Jonez, who portrayed Henry. And we really created a deep working bond over the 2 weeks that we worked. And sadly, I didn't get to work with the Volunteers much except for one day. But that day that we had was at the end of our shoot. And I thought that it was a really, I don't know how you felt about it, Wavyy, but I felt like that was a really beautiful day where we were all out in this field, and Curtis got to make his speech up there, and we were all watching him. And there was something very beautiful. Like we were making this fun half-hour comedy, but we were also doing something that maybe felt slightly bigger than that, and having a good time while doing it.
Wavyy, I want to ask you, also, you played the Wall. Tell me a little bit more about your character. He's one of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. Tell me a little bit more about your character and sort of what motivated him to fight.
The Wall is like a gentle giant, he's one of those characters to where he's down for his people. He really wants the best of the situation, but with the same token, it's like he's kind of soft at heart, he's a different type of character. Let me just explain like the road to getting this. When I first seen it, when the audition came through, I looked at it and was like, wow, what I want to, like, where do I fit in this world? I was like, well, what the hell is this? So it made me start actually researching the show. And what really blew me away was the modern spin on it. Because you don't see a lot of shows like this to where they're actually talking and saying things like lit and have this dope way of speaking and things like that from this day and time or whatever. And it really drew me to the project, and being able to build with Gabe and the Volunteers and everybody. Actually, Gabe, we also had that scene when we was standing in front of the center. When you came through to tell the fellas that we weren't gonna be able to get our guns,
That's right. That was my full dress.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, so we had all that working, and and the Wall is just a real real dope person. He was down for his people, and he wanted the best for us, especially going in there to where we didn't have our guns. We couldn't have any weapons. The volunteers weren't able to have weapons. So going into battle with nothing like that kind of broke him. Like I forgot what episode that was when he was able to see that, kind of like everything changed from a strong person to kind of his softer side. Yeah, he's just a gentle giant.
He's a great character. I wanted to share, I don't know if you remember this, but there was one day that I really remember from the shooting where Dave Thomas, he's the president of the Friends of the African American Cemetery in Rye, came to the set, and he met with some of the cast members, and he was talking a little bit about the real life history and what motivated these soldiers to fight in real life. And Apple took some video, did an interview with him, and I wanted to just share a clip of that because I thought he was really eloquent about this. This is Dave Thomas talking about the real life history behind these troops.
This was something special. When you go to volunteer for a fight in your own country as a segregated person, and to take that much time, take that journey to fight for your country when you really weren't wanted in that country. I find this to be unimaginable to me personally, but to them it was, they had varying motivations for doing that. Some of it could have been love of country. Some of it could have been revenge for slavery. Some of it could have been to find relatives that were still enslaved in the South. We don't know why they went, but we do know they did go. And that act of volunteerism should be honored. And that's one of the missions that I undertook when I actually started the Friends of the African American Cemetery.
You remember that day, Wavyy, when he came?
Absolutely. Meeting Dave was one of those moments for us because we were always just on set. We was having fun, and they came out and was like, this gentleman named Dave Thomas would like to speak to you guys about what you're doing here. And when he came, he started thanking us, and we're like, that was that moment where we kind of stopped and was like, wait a minute, this is way bigger than just filming a show. Like some of us knew, but some of us didn't. So when he came through and he actually told us the history behind everything, that's when it resonated with all of us. Like, wow, this is bigger than us. This is actually something bigger than us that we're doing. It's not just a gig. This is real life. These people really went through this. So yeah, I definitely remember that day. Yeah,
it was quite a day. We're getting a ton of questions in, and I want to make sure we get to a lot of these. Marina, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit before we do about how you transformed this place in the way you did, because it was, I don't know, I mean, if you've never been involved, I had not been involved in a TV show. You guys all have before, but it's like an army moves in here with the army. There's like 100 people. I remember one day there was a tree, a big tree with a gnarled root, and they said, we want to drive a big truck over, a big Caterpillar. And I said, you can't do that. It's going to kill the tree. Don't do that. And they said, don't worry, we'll build a bridge. And they built this arcing bridge over the root to drive the tree over. I mean, it was just amazing, kind of the creativity and the scale of the effort involved. So maybe Marina, can you tell us a little bit about how you did this?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. I do just want to say first though, that it was a huge undertaking, and we are used to putting a ton of work into completely transforming spaces. And usually people walk into them and have no idea what it looked like before. And so they're like, great, this is whatever it is. And it was such a joy that in this instance, I think it was really clear that there wasn't a Civil War camp living in your backyard. And so when the actors came in, I feel like you guys were so appreciative of this world that was built for you. And that was really, really nice to see. That was really gratifying.
And you guys took great care of the place too. I mean, I was kind of joking about the trucks, but with that many people in a historic place, I mean, we're worried about every
That's
doorknob breaking or whatever. And these guys took really immaculate care of the place and cleaned up after themselves. So I think it was a good experience all around.
We had an incredible crew of people. Tim Metzger, one of the best lead men in New York, and all of his people are amazing. And they were very concerned about taking good care of your property, and are excellent problem solvers, and spent a month building that entire town. And I think one of the hardest things that we had to confront was not just constructing a town and the fences and all of these areas, but here, let me try to share an image and see if this works. Sorry. Am I? So this is a trip that I took to a South Carolina sea island, which is where we were set. It's like very tropical, shockingly tropical, this amazing combination of Spanish moss and palm trees and sand, just like transporting. This is what J Heritage Center looked like when we moved in to start making these tents. It dumped so much snow that year that it was up until the moment that we started shooting. We couldn't have done it if the set dressers were not so fearless and so committed to. They were out there shoveling snow as it was falling down in order to build tents, and it was really just by the grace of God that at the last minute it all sort of cleared up and we were able to have a world that was not full of snow and much more believably South Carolina.
Yeah, when I saw the Spanish moss hanging from the tree out front, I couldn't believe it. I felt I was walking into the South.
Yeah, we had a wonderful greens crew who had cranes and got all that up there. I think the Spanish moss really made a big difference. But we did, I don't know, there was a company called Tyler Dawkins was the assistant set decorator who really spearheaded this set. She found a company in New Hampshire that creates tents for reenactors, and they themselves are living history reenactors, so they're really into it. This is their catalog, like beautiful hand-drawn images. This is the kind of images they would send us as examples about what we could do. The other resource that was incredibly helpful for us was, and this is some of the set coming together. The other resource that was really helpful for us is the Matthew Brady photos. In the beginning of Dickinson, we were working in the 1850s and there weren't really photographs of interior spaces, so that was super tough. But in the Civil War, there are all of these images of what soldiers' lives looked like. And so that was like that was a really, really helpful resource for us as a jumping off point about how to, this is the inside of Higginson's tent that is based off of these images that we collected about how to the set dressers were out there collecting logs to make shelves for clothes to be dried by the fire. So it was, it was a really fun rabbit hole to go down.
It's incredible. I mean, Higginson's tent, it was like, and I remember reading about this, Brenda, in your book, about what he had in the camp. He's got Shakespeare and he's got Victor Hugo and he's got plates of oysters, and it was quite a thing. The other thing that I didn't mention at the beginning that was filmed here. So there was this camp in the back, but if you've seen the show, the opening montage to season 3 is a battle scene I'll show you the picture of, whoops, if I have it here. Oh, I don't have it handy, but it's that opening scene where Emily climbs over the wall and there's explosions flying everywhere. They did that. That was an interesting day too, when the crew came to us and said, no. And they have a very kind of gentle way of doing this. They say, do you mind, there might be a few explosions in the meadow, but they're not going to be close to the house. But that was something to behold. Also, these charges and the special effects that were blowing up in the background. I want to get to a few questions from viewers. We have one. I should have mentioned at the beginning too. The star of this show, who plays Emily Dickinson, is the Academy Award nominee Haley Steinfeld. A viewer asks, "What is it like to work with Haley Steinfeld?" Gabe, you want to take that one?
None of us got to work with Haley Steinfeld.
Okay.
Our storyline was separate. I had one great week on set. In the final episode of the season, Higginson very boldly comes to the Dickinson household because he wants to meet her, but she won't come downstairs. So I got to work with all the rest of the Dickinsons, but never Haley herself. Although we did go to the wrap party where we got to hang out with her, and she's incredibly lovely and gracious, and really seemed like, I've found on projects in the theater and definitely on film as well, that if there's a good vibe on set, it's because the number one on the call sheet, and the number one on the call sheet's normally the protagonist of the piece. If there's a good vibe on set, it's because the number one on the call sheet has set a good tone, is a good leader, is someone who you can get behind, is someone who's not leading with ego, but is leading with grace, is leading with teamwork. And the vibe was amazing from the moment we all got to set. So that means that if it trickles from the top down, that her and Elena are great leaders.
I remember I remember one day when she was filming here on the set. This was, again, my introduction to movie magic. She's climbing over the wall and they're blowing things up around her. And the shot was, it can now be told, she's standing by the wall. There's somebody on a ladder with a plate of dirt right over her head, and they say action, and somebody dumps the dirt on her head to show the explosion coming down. So it was kind of funny to see it.
And those are the glamorous days.
That was a fun day. Marina, I have a question for you. This is a good question, and we're actually doing a program. We're doing a series of programs this year on about Emily Dickinson and her life. And one of the programs that we're doing in June is about Emily Dickinson's gardening life. She was a gardener, and so a viewer asks, Marina, was there a deliberate choice in choosing certain flowers in some scenes, knowing how important flowers were for Dickinson? Did you focus on the symbolism of the flowers you picked? And can you give any examples of that?
Yes. There is a lot of information about Emily's gardening. She was more famous in her lifetime for horticulture than she was for her poems or writing. So there are books that talk about the flowers in Emily's gardens, and there are a lot of flowers that are name checked in her poems. She writes about flowers a lot and personifies them. We had a greensperson, a super talented greensperson, Jenny Walsh, who is the one who was hanging the Spanish moss in the trees, who really planted the garden. And some of it came down to necessity and practicality, but I think she very carefully chose flowers that were appropriate for the region or that Emily had specifically called out. She famously had these herbariums where she would collect and press flowers and keep them in these elaborate pages. I think the Emily Dickinson Museum still has those pages. So there was a real effort as much as possible to be, I think one of the things that's really incredible about Emily is that she appreciated beauty. Like her vision of beauty was not very narrow, it was quite broad. And there was an intention, a clear intention, like in Higginson's tent, and to have bits of nature brought in there. It wasn't always flowers, it was sometimes like pine needles or a tortoise shell, but I think we really wanted to, and I guess I've segued a little bit, but we really wanted to illustrate that these two people who had, very little in common in terms of where they were situated, had really resonant souls and similar ways of appreciating beauty. And so these tiny details that may or may not have been noticed, we really tried to integrate that both into Gabe into Higginson's tent, as well as Emily's room, where there are these, in the chaos of life, they were still appreciating these tiny, tiny moments and the grandeur of nature, even in its like smallest vessels. So the flowers in her garden that Death eventually shows up in but in a celebratory way. Yes, as much as possible, they went through the catalogs of what flowers she had and what flowers she name checked. But we also had to use flowers that were blooming when we were shooting.
That's and that's a great point you make too about the relationship between the two. Brenda, how did they meet in real life? How did they not so much meet, but how did they come to know each other in the first place? They were far apart.
Well, they were both New Englanders, for one thing, and Dickinson was a great reader. She read a magazine that's still with us called The Atlantic Monthly, and in his time, everyone knew who Higginson was. He was a deal. He was a deal partly because he was a radical abolitionist, and he was a deal because he was a writer. And at one point, I mean, he wrote about the rebellion of Nat Turner in Virginia. He wrote about Denmark Vesey. He was a long time anti-slavery advocate, very radical. He was one of the backers of John Brown. So he was known and not always liked for his politics, but he wrote a piece in the Atlantic Monthly called Letter to a Young Contributor. And he basically said in it, these are the things you have to do if you want to write for a magazine. And Dickinson read it, and she wrote him a letter. Now, the interesting thing is that he got a huge amount of mail, as you would expect even today. If somebody wrote in the Atlantic Monthly or the New Yorker or whatever, this is how you can get published here. Imagine the mail. So he got a lot of mail, but hers stuck out to him. And in fact, when I actually saw her letter to him, and it was in an envelope, but she didn't sign it, and she enclosed an envelope within an envelope, and the smaller envelope had her calling card in it. And I remember I was so excited. I saw it in Boston. It was thrilling to me. I got home. I told my husband about it, and he said he was a dead man as soon as he opened that. In other words, she was so smart in the ability to come on to this guy who was writing this piece. So he, of course, answered her. And what's interesting, too, is that not only did he answer her, but whatever he said to her, we don't have that letter, she answered him back, and that started their correspondence. Now, one of the things that's important about Dickinson is lots of people wanted her to publish. A lot of people tried to get her to do things she didn't want to do. So if she hadn't wanted to answer him, she wouldn't have. That's how it started. In the show, Gabe is Higginson, and Dickinson don't come together in Amherst till actually after the war. In the show, it's during the war. And when Higginson actually went to the house, Dickinson, they met, it's recorded. He wrote notes to his wife. He was married at the time. And very touchingly, when he was coming to the house, she put all of his books, all the things he had written around, so that when he came in, he would feel very welcome. So it was a really interesting relationship. They met again in Amherst. He again went to see her. And the third time was at her funeral. And she stipulated that he speak at her funeral, which is also very touching. Of all the people to choose, she wanted him there. So.
You mentioned that first letter that she sent, the detail from I can't remember if it was the first letter, Brenda, or another one. She was describing herself, in the language she used. She said, my eyes are like the color of sherry in the bottom of a glass. And It's like, whoa,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, she was really quite something.
What was the was it a romantic relationship? They were far apart.
I mean, it had its elements of that. I mean, the nice thing about the writer Elena and everybody who was in, the way Gabe acted, there's a sense of romance there, but he was enthralled. Higginson was enthralled by her writing. for his part. And she knew that he didn't get everything. He tried to give her advice and this and that. But I think she was, it's hard to know, but it's guesswork. But she, I think, was enthralled by his, for want of a better word, his radicalism, that he was as out there in his way as she was in hers. And so, yeah, I guess you could say in the larger sense it's romantic, but it's deeper and more complicated than that, I think. Imagine she wants him to speak at her funeral. So what is that? Is that romantic? That's something very special. That you would want him there to represent something and say something.
The way that I felt reading your book was that there was a flirtation in the way
that spoke, definitely.
but that it was two people who felt maybe intellectually like on an island sometimes, and two incredibly hardworking, prolific writers who met someone who could understand them, who could see them. And there is a flirtation in that, but it was more on a soul level. It felt like.
Exactly. I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's transmitted. I think that's conveyed.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
A couple of good viewer questions. One is for Wavyy. The question is, they're asking, was there a specific person in particular to inspire your embodiment of the wall? Was it based on an actual historical character, or was there a particular person that you were drawing on? And then, and the second part of the question is, what was it like to bring to life a largely unrecognized group of people in Civil War history?
Wow. That's a great question. As far as who kind of inspired me, one of the brothers that played, I forgot the name he played, but Nori Davis and Miles Evans, they sent me a picture of the guy from Green Mile. They was like, you gotta act more like this. And I was like, I'm not doing that. It's like, I don't want to do that. So I just kind of wanted to make him a lot cooler than what everybody was kind of trying to put him as. They kind of wanted him just to be a little, well, this is all of them, because before Jonez's character came to actually teach them, there was a lot they didn't know. They didn't know how to read and write. So just having that, when they said that, I was like, no, we got to make him a lot cooler. So it was him, but I kind of had my spin on things. As far as bringing to life characters that people don't really know, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do it, because it's a story that needs to be told. It's characters that need to be honored in this way, to show the heroism of it, of what they did, of standing on something and actually wanting to go forth and fight to go get their guns. That part in there with Higginson is like, he tells Jonez's character, he's like, then I forgot how it went, Gabe, when you told him that the guns were somewhere. You kind of gave him the hint to go get the guns.
I can't give them to you, but I can tell you where they are.
Yeah, I can tell you where they are. So it was that, and just showing the heroism of these guys that nobody really knew, and to actually bring them to life was a complete honor.
I just want to add to that too. I thought one of the beautiful things that I learned about Higginson is that when he died, he was buried in the 1st South Carolina Volunteers flag, and that was deeply important to him to not be buried in the American flag, but to be buried in that flag.
Yeah. There's one other thing I want to add, especially to what Wavyy is saying, because I don't know that it came across, and something Kevin said. What was interesting about this regiment, it was the first federally authorized regiment of former enslaved people. So a lot of the regiments in the North that were made up of Black troops were free Blacks. This group in South Carolina, they had been slaves just, I don't know, months, year before. That's what's incredible. That's why they didn't know how to read or write. That's what is, that's what also the show gets so right, because they're so excited and they're so unlike the character of Henry, they're unschooled, but they're ready to go. They just get things, and they're fighting for freedom. And Higginson, in that context, everybody knew he was a marked man, because the Confederates said that if they catch a white officer in the South, because they're in the South, I mean, that's incredible. They're in the heart of the Confederacy. If they catch him, they would just hang him without a trial. That would be the end of it. So that's really, they were all in serious danger all of the time.
Yeah. One of the great pleasures, I think, was to portray men who are willing to die for something bigger than themselves, to die for the future, to die for each other. And that's a great privilege to try and bring that to life.
Yeah, and to see they actually wanted to fight. Like, they wanted to fight. Like, these guys was ready to do it from day one. Like we just want our guns, and we're gonna go do what we got to do for our regiment. So yeah.
And they fought well. They fought well and earned everybody's respect, forgetting Higginson, because he was the sort of goofy guy who has to learn on the premises. But back in Washington and the other places, I mean, nobody thought, they thought, oh, well, former slaves, what do they know? They were so condescending. And here, suddenly there's this great regiment that is fighting really hard and very heroic.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. Well said. We have a viewer question for Marina, also about what the question is, what was your favorite? Do you have a favorite scene or a favorite set in season 3?
Oh, those are always really tough questions. It's it feels dramatic to say that it's like choosing between children, but it is favorite set in season 3. I really loved the conservatory, which I think someone has another question about. It's just a moment really in the overall story. It's part of that really dense episode, episode 4, I think, where she meets Walt Whitman and ends up in a Civil War hospital, and then ends up in an underground gay bar, and then I don't know. There's a lot that happens in that episode, and ends up back in the conservatory. And in real life, really the only thing that happens in that episode is she's reading the leaves of grass in this conservatory. But the rest of the episode is happening in her imagination. And it's really fun. I think Elena once said, like, the most interesting things that happened to Emily Dickinson happened in her head. And I think that's what this show really seeks to bring to life, is the historical context around her, but also the bringing her imagination to life. But the conservatory was fun because it was like putting all of those colors together. We did labor over that a little bit because it was a real tableau, it wasn't really a space that was being moved through. And so we really wanted like the color of the dress to work with that daybed that we built. We wanted her to be comfy. We wanted it to be like a cozy space where you would want to curl up and read a book. We wanted all the plants to feel, we wanted there to be a little bit of mist on the windows so that you could get the sense that it would be like humid and warm in there, and you could just lose yourself in thought. And we made a big effort throughout the show to think carefully about the way that the colors we were using in the sets would interact with the colors that were being used in the costumes, so that the whole picture would complement each other.
Brenda, I wanted to ask about Dickinson herself, her output. I mean, she was incredibly productive during 1862 and 1863. Were those her most productive years as a poet?
Well, I think the period from say around 1862, maybe to about 18 after the war, probably 67, 68, that particular period. Tremendous number of poems. There may be more actually, but I think there were almost 2,000 that were written in her lifetime, which is a huge amount of poetry, if anybody knows poetry. So yeah, but that particular period was, and I guess scholars debate why that particular period, but that particular period was a one of intense creativity for her.
Yeah, I was going to, I mean, what was it about the war, do you think, that inspired her in that way?
I'm not sure it was the war. I mean, I think it started a little bit before and it certainly went afterwards. I mean, what's interesting about the war is that she doesn't talk about it directly. Marina mentioned Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman is writing war poems. He publishes a whole volume of poetry about the war called Drum Taps. I mean, so she never, and for many years, nobody even thought she mentioned it. Oh, she's just this girl up in Amherst, locked in her house. What does she know from war? It's very condescending toward her too. Everybody's condescending toward everybody, it seems. But in any event, she obviously, there were people dying in Amherst. A lot of people, as the show says, are going off to war. You could not know about the war. I mean, it affected everything, and it was changing. Everything had led up to it for her whole lifetime, and it was changing everything. Nobody'd seen anything like this before. There were families turned against one another. The country was breaking apart. So of course she knew about it, but she mentions it in ways that are not literal or direct or obvious, the way other poets, good and bad, did. But clearly she was dealing and had dealt before with issues of grief, loss, mourning, fear, all of those kinds of things, excitement even. And so I think that probably didn't end with the end of the war.
Speaking of grief, loss, fear, I mean, you guys were filming this this was a year ago now. This was in the middle of COVID pandemic. And so not only do you have all the challenges of filming a show, but you had, I mean, it was incredibly difficult to do under those conditions. I remember the actors who were on camera had to be PCR tested every day because they couldn't wear a mask. Wavyy, what was that like filming in those conditions?
Oh man, it was something else, man. It really was. And I remember, I think they had a halt to where we couldn't even film for like a couple of weeks because something happened, and it might have been an outbreak. I don't know, but just going to set with having to wear the mask, and still keep distance when we're trying to be these characters that were so close. And everything, but it really was something different. But working with this crew here was amazing. The casting crew of Dickinson was amazing, and just to bring to life Elena Smith's dynamic vision on this whole thing throughout all of this. And Elena, she wasn't even on set. I think she came on set one time, maybe.
That's right.
But she was on Zoom most of the time, so we had to keep sending her clips of what we were doing, and she was reaching out to us and letting us know that she was loving the work that she's seen, and but it was definitely one of those times, but it was more memorable because of what we were dealing with COVID-19 and everything else that made everything even more special.
I mentioned that we're doing this exhibit this summer, and one of the things that we have here is the costumes. One of the things about the uniforms of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers is they had these red pants were part of the uniforms. Gabe, Higginson hated the red pants. Why? Everybody hated the red pants. Why do they hate?
It's like a walking target,
Right.
Yeah, really. Who would like them?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Although I gotta say, once we all got dressed up in them, I was like, hey, there's something to this. We look kind of sharp.
We did. It definitely was sharp.
Yeah. You can't tell in the black and white sort of daguerreotype images from that period. Everyone just looks like they were dressed in black or blue or something. But no, it's actually, it's amazing to think so many of my associations with that time are all in black and white or sepia. And so to actually have all this vibrant color all around, I don't know, it made me think about it in a different way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was really relieved because the snow melted, but everything was kind of dead. I was really relieved that you guys had those red pants. So there was a little bit of
Yeah, so something could pop.
visual. Yeah. But I don't know. Brenda, do you know, was it just this regiment that had the red pants? That wasn't all regiments.
No, it wasn't all regiments. It was probably leftovers. I mean, eventually, Higginson complained a lot. Complained about the pay that the volunteers that the regiment wasn't getting. He was fighting for that all the time. And he wanted them to get regulation clothes too. So it was not typical at all.
Yeah, one of the beautiful moments I think in the show actually is when Henry tries to make the guys look smart. He wants them to dress up and fix their outfits. Everyone's got holes in their pants and they're wearing hand-me-downs.
Or no sleeves. Wavyy had no sleeves.
That's right. Even clothes that they probably pulled off of dead bodies.
For dead bodies. I was gonna say that. Yeah.
So I love that sequence where they smarten up. They find a way to do the best with what they've been given. A good metaphor, and it was a beautiful scene.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, we're getting toward the end of our hour. I can't believe it, but we have a question from an attendee. She asks, is the J Heritage Center available to visit? And it is available to visit. We're actually open. We're open from sunrise to sunset, 7 days a week. We just installed a beautiful garden and it's open on Sundays from 10 to 5. Please do come visit and come visit the exhibit that we're going to be doing. As I mentioned, we've got a series of programs this year about Emily Dickinson's life. We have with Marta McDowell in June about Emily Dickinson's gardening life in the garden. We have this exhibit here in the house, which will also open this summer, that includes the costumes, it includes the props. You can walk through the sets yourself. So please do come visit that. And you all have my email. So shoot me an email if you have any questions about hours or anything like that. Brenda, what are you working on next?
Well, it's very different. My most recent book was about the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, who was impeached mainly because he turned back all the victories of the Civil War. So that was pretty interesting, but I've left that behind. I'm working on a book about the 1925 Scopes trial against evolution.
Wow. Okay. Awesome. Gabe, what are you working on?
I've been like Wavyy. I am also a musician, and actually I was very inspired by Wavyy and his ability to produce his own work and put it out. And as you can see, I've got a lot of instruments behind me that I play. And I've spent a lot of time in this room playing them, but I haven't really shared them. And so one thing I'm working on is recording some of my music and making a record. Right. And then I'm about to begin work on a production of The Misanthrope by Moliere, which is a great play from the 1700s. And we're going to do it in Prospect Park. And it's a wonderful play. So I'm diving into
this summer. Are you going to do it this summer?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Here in Brooklyn.
Great.
Fantastic. Go see Gabe in The Misanthrope. Wavyy, what are you working on?
Well, I'm inspired now, so I'm about to work on some music and get back to that for sure. I was already talking about putting out an album sometime this year, so I'm gonna be working on that. I've actually done 3 films since we filmed Dickinson.
Wow.
Come on,
so
Wavyy.
those will be coming out.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm gonna start writing and producing pretty soon here too.
Fantastic. Marina, you said you're doing something about a 20th century project?
Yeah, I am working right now on it's a version of The Talented Mr. Ripley. So it's based on the Patricia Highsmith books, based in the 1950s. It's not my project. Most of it is shot in Europe and Italy. So there's an Italian set decorator, and the main set decorator here is Stephanie Bowen, but I'm working on it, and it's really fun to have some sets to dig into. Yeah.
All right. It's 7:01. I thought maybe I wanted to share one more clip from the interview with Dave Thomas, which was really moving. And he's talking in this clip about the importance of history and historic preservation. I really like this clip, so let me share that with you.
What I would tell young people is preservation of the history is important because, like the saying goes, if we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And it will happen again. And I'm not saying it might, I'm saying it will happen again if we are not diligent. And the exploration and the education of history has been sort of pushed aside these days. And a lot of people don't realize how important that is to our future generation and to our present circumstances. A lot of what's going on today is because people are not educated about their history, or a lot of the actual history was left out or deleted on purpose. So research your history. Find out about your particular family first, your community, your state, your ethnic group, your group in general, even friends and family and people you know. And then the most important thing, preserving our history and our way of life takes a special type of effort. And one of the things that we all should be doing, and it's very important, and I tell everyone, is to vote. And the vote is what they fought for.
Right, wise words from Dave Thomas, and it seems like a good note to end on tonight. Somebody mentioned earlier, they said they were talking about, I think it was Marina was saying that at the center of the show also is the poetry. And that's one of the things that I loved about the show too. We've been talking tonight about history, but in a way, poetry is outside history in some way. It aims for a kind of timelessness. And there was a line I saw, Brenda, in your book. Emily is writing to Higginson, and she says, "The only news I know is bulletins all day from immortality." This is in the middle of the Civil War, and that line really struck me. And I think you all should be proud that you have produced something lasting in this show that I think people are going to watch for a long time. And so I'm so grateful to all of you for joining us tonight. Please come see our exhibit this summer and learn a little bit more about the real life history. And thank you again, all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye-bye.